All right. I am here with Paula Zaro. Hey, Paula.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I'm happy to see you, and I'm very happy to talk to you today about what I call a passion that you've turned into a profession and your love of dogs, and now the training and the showing of dogs as a professional career.
Yeah,
But
thank you for having me.
it's my pleasure to have you. And you and I go back to 2016. You're a fellow Marine, but both of us did not know each other when we were active duty. We met in 2016 when we were both civilians, and I was in Croatia at an embassy for the Marine Corps birthday, and you were there too, and we've been friends ever since.
Yes, following along each other's adventures.
We sure have, and I really appreciate you. And before we get into any questions about the passion to your profession,
Yeah.
tell me about yourself. Tell a little bit about yourself.
All right. I am the child of immigrant parents. I came over from Warsaw, Poland when I was 4 years old. Originally started out in Florida, and then we eventually migrated up to Chicago, which is a very obviously Polish friendly neighborhood. Lived in Chicago for a couple of years. My parents eventually moved us out into the suburbs, and I went to school out there, obviously, and developed a passion for dogs. Always loved dogs from the time I was a little kid, but eventually got into the sport and obedience training of dogs, kind of by accident. And here I am.
And again, I'm happy that you're going to do this because I love animals. I love dogs. I grew up with dogs, but I really have not had dogs in my life as an adult, other than
Mhm.
maybe early 20s. After that, never again. Travel, just sometimes the inconvenience of,
Yeah.
taking care of a dog. But I find it so interesting that you've turned a passion into a profession. I think that's a wonderful thing. So, what age were you and where were you when you found out you really had a love for dogs?
So when I actually can remember,
Yeah.
I was about 8 or 9. However, stories from, family gatherings and going back to visit my family overseas, because I do still have most of my family is still in Europe. I apparently was crawling around on the floor from the time I was about 3, barking, sitting, trying to scratch my ears. So it was definitely something that from very, very early on, I had a love and passion for dogs, and begged my parents when I was much younger constantly, like, can we get a dog? Can we get a dog? And I think my parents were both working super hard, trying to kind of chase that American dream when we originally got to the States. They came with 2 suitcases, us kids, and $1,000 in their pocket. And that's
Wow.
kind of how they started their journey in the States. And so for a little while, it was just kind of something that was unattainable just with their schedules and trying to get us to school, put us in activities so that we could kind of integrate into the culture. So I didn't get my first dog until I was 9 years old.
What type of dog was it?
She was a Doberman.
Doberman.
And we unfortunately lost her very young. So she was only a year old when she passed. And it was obviously super hard for me, having been the one that was getting up every single morning with her, feeding her, taking her outside, taking her for walks. So a couple of months passed by, and we decided, my parents were always raised with German Shepherds. So we decided to fill out an application with a local organization that rescued just specifically German Shepherds, and got put on a wait list, and got a call Christmas Eve that they have a puppy for us and if we would be interested in fostering. Um, and we picked her up January 2nd, and the rest was history. So she was kind of my way into the dog world. We had her for about 3 years, 4 years, into my teenage years, and she developed some behavioral issues from, stuff stemming from the area that we lived in. She wasn't super fond of teenage boys. She got bullied
Who
a little
is?
bit got bullied a little bit in the neighborhood. So she was a little reactive on leash. I went to the organization that I got her from, did a rescue picnic every single year. So you could bring your dog, hang out, barbecue. They put like kiddie pools out for the dogs to be able to lay in.
That's nice.
They ran what's called a lure coursing track, which is essentially like a paper bag attached to a line on a dolly, and the dogs would run and chase it, kind of like the racetrack dogs would do.
Okay.
So they would set that up. And so I ran her on the lure a few times and then kind of got into a conversation with the president of the organization at the time and told her the issues that I was facing with her. At that point, my parents were building a new house in a nicer neighborhood. So we were in the process of moving. And my mom basically said, we've got to get a handle on this. She can't be behaving like this when we go into a new neighborhood. We've got to figure it out. So they put me in touch with somebody that I now basically consider my second mother. She was my mentor through dog training. And so the whole training kind of happened by accident. It wasn't something that I intentionally really ever wanted to do. I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was younger. And when I started training her specifically, my mentor created a behavior modification program. I worked super hard with her every single week, several times a day to kind of get her through all those issues she was having. And my mentor at the time said, do you have any interest in training dogs? And I was like, well, I never really thought about it. And she's like, you have a natural hand and you have a natural way of being able to connect with dogs just through my body language and how I communicated with her specifically. But at that point, I was going to group classes with other clients and I would help people out when they were struggling, teaching their dog something new. Just kind of took it upon myself to help teach them. And she kind of saw that passion and that desire to want to help people connect with their dogs on a better level. And it basically just went up from there.
Was this before you joined the Marine Corps, or is this after you got out of the Marine Corps?
Yes, way before. So
Way
I
before.
started doing this around 14.
And do you have a memory after you had your first memory of a dog in your house that you never were without a dog ever again?
A memory?
Yeah. Have you always had a dog in your life?
No. So that for that period where, from the time my parents moved from overseas to about that 9-year mark, we didn't have dogs. My dad had his family dog, which technically was his, but he wasn't the greatest with kids, wasn't ever around kids when he was younger. So when my parents moved to an apartment and then had me and subsequently had my brother, he ended up staying behind at my grandparents' house. He was a big, huge 120-pound black German Shepherd.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so like I was around him, but he didn't live with us. So my first actual experience was when I got that Doberman. Her name was Shadow. When I got her at 9 years old. So, but basically from there, I've had one ever since.
That's lovely. I want to touch bases on this later, not now, but when you mentioned the big black German Shepherd, I was attacked by a dog as an adult, a big black German Shepherd,
Oh
and
boy.
it put a fear in me of German Shepherds. And I love those dogs.
Yeah.
So what I want to talk about later is what kind of advice would you give someone that's looking for a dog, but there's a fear of a certain species, that type of thing.
Okay.
But I'm interested in you not only train dogs, but you've shown dogs professionally too, haven't you, in your life?
Yep.
So you have this well-rounded love and passion. Like I said, I keep saying a passion into a profession.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it kind of happened by accident because of one of your mentors that led you into that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my mentor did all of that training for my German Shepherd when we were having issues with her. And she bred and showed and raised Great Danes. So I started showing dogs at 14, 15 years old. And that was just done from a junior's perspective, which is a program that the American Kennel Club offers for kids 9 to 18 years old. So you start very young. You also get paired with a mentor, and they kind of walk you through that entire community and show you how to groom, show you how to prepare your dog. When you're going into a show ring, we teach the dogs how to stack, which is standing nicely so the judge can examine them. We teach the dogs to show their mouth so the judge can examine their bite and make sure that they have all their teeth. And then they kind of go over them, and then we teach them how to like run around the ring, watching their movement, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I did that as well.
Is there a certain like species, right? Is the right species of dog that is not the right word?
Breed.
Breed. Listen to me. I should have done a little bit more homework, right?
That's okay.
I don't even know if I can edit that out. I guess I'll just put that in.
No,
That's why I'm
it's
talking
okay.
to you.
No
When I
editing.
said species, I was like, what? That doesn't sound correct. I even did a horrible job of introducing you because I haven't done this in a while. And I wanted to say Paula
Okay.
Zaro and say your full name, and I didn't. I
You're
just
good.
said, "Hey, Paula, yeah, I know I'm good with it, but I wanted to give you props and I'll put all this in the post later, like your link, your website, and that type of thing. But
Awesome.
is there a certain breed of dog that you say no to train, or are you open to any dog that's brought to you,
No,
like a problematic breed?
I train every dog, every breed. There's definitely breeds that are harder. Um, and most of it just kind of boils down to the lifestyle of the person. And a lot of times people see dogs and they connect with them on a physical level, right? They have like a certain look that they like, but that dog might not fit their lifestyle. So, for instance, people love huskies.
Oh yeah,
Huskies are beautiful dogs. They require an immense amount of exercise. They are a working breed. They are bred to pull sleds. They love being outside and they have to have exercise on a daily basis. It is not a dog for a person that works a 9 to 5 outside of the house and doesn't want to exercise. They're the perfect companion if you're like a jogger or if you're a runner, if you're an avid runner, great dogs. But if you run a pretty mellow lifestyle, it is not the breed for you.
interesting. I'm glad to hear that. What about the climate with the husky? Does that really come into play with the type of climate you live in?
Not really. So obviously their coats, they have a double coat. The Huskies, the Alaskan Malamutes, the Samoyeds, all of those, they're called Nordic breeds. Um, yes, they don't do great in the heat, but their coat also protects them from the heat. So it protects them from whether it's cold elements or hot elements. So it's always interesting when I see people, let's say for instance, walking into a grooming salon and they're like, oh, I want to shave my dog. And a good groomer, because again, not all groomers, not all trainers, not all veterinarians are created equally. A good groomer will educate the client and let them know, like, hey, I understand that you think that you're doing a good thing for your dog, but they need their coat. So they will discourage people, and it doesn't always stop everybody, but they will discourage people from, for instance, like shaving their dog down, thinking that, oh, that's going to keep them cooler.
Okay. So living like right now, I'm in the southeast of Louisiana, southern
Yep.
Louisiana, United States, very hot and humid in the summertime.
Mhm.
Husky would be fine here.
They would be
Based on what
fine
you
as
said.
long as they're like not in the elements all day. They
Right.
love being outdoors, but when it starts getting too hot, you definitely have to, watch the heat
Yeah.
for them. And a lot of breeds are like that.
So when I was growing up, we had Labrador retrievers. That's a big thing here because
Mhm.
duck hunting is such
Yeah.
a such a pastime here in the southern U.S., especially Louisiana. And I don't know much about all the breeds. I know the breeds I like, and like I told you, I grew up loving dogs. Have you ever heard of a Catahoula leopard dog?
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, I only remember registering this because I want to say that they're bred in the swamps of Louisiana.
Correct.
Yeah, and they're a
Yep.
very unique looking dog. Their eyes are
Very.
very, very unique,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, a lot of them have blue eyes. They come in a wide variety of colors. They're hunting dogs. Also energetic. Again, like they need a job. A lot of those dogs in the working and sporting group are dogs that, inherently need a job to be able to be biologically satisfied.
Right. That's amazing. So what type of dogs do you currently have in your home?
So I have two Cane Corsos, which are Italian Mastiffs, bred obviously in Italy, Sicily area. They're smaller in terms of like the Mastiff breeds because there's several. So they're what we would consider within the Mastiff family, the more medium size. Average females are 90 to 120 pounds. Males are usually 100 to like 140 pounds, which it is still large, but we have breeds like the Neapolitan Mastiff that can be up to like 190 pounds. And then we have the English Mastiff, and those can get up to like 240 pounds. So I've
Well,
got two of those.
that's amazing.
And then a French Bulldog
Yeah.
who's laying right next to me, probably snorting. You might be able to hear her.
I thought it
And
was
then
you.
I have a 9-month-old black German Shepherd.
Lovely. So, what rumors can you dispel about certain breeds? Like, obviously, a pit bull. If you don't know much about dogs, you buy into the narrative about pit bulls because of stories we hear about. What
Yeah.
can you do to clear that up?
So the biggest myth that people have about pit bulls is that their jaws lock when they bite. Um,
That's
and
what I thought.
while, sorry,
That's what I thought.
yeah. So if a dog's jaw locked, they wouldn't be able to open it back up again, right? So they wouldn't be able to eat, they wouldn't be able to drink.
Yeah.
So the difference between a pit bull and other breeds is that their pounds per square inch, it's called PSI, I believe,
Yeah, right.
is much harder than most breeds. I don't quote me on it. I really don't remember what it is, but I want to say it's something like between 6 and 8,000 pounds per square inch of force when they bite down with their jaw. I could be totally off, but I know that they're one of the hardest biting breeds. Other breeds that are comparable are the Rottweiler, the Corso, and a couple other of the big like power and bully breeds.
No, I love this conversation because I have friends that have pit bulls and I fell in love with them. They were wonderful dogs in the house and they had
Yeah.
children around them.
Yep.
And like you mentioned earlier, it's the conditions around them and their owners, the lifestyle that they have around them.
Absolutely. Yeah. The pit bull's nickname is the nanny dog. So they are wonderful with children. A lot of them do suffer a little bit from like same-sex dog aggression. So they don't do the best in multi-dog households. They have a very high prey drive. So if they're not raised with cats, for instance, they don't do great with cats. And again, like the aggression issues definitely can be problematic, but it has part genetics and part how the dog is raised. So
Yeah.
I know plenty of pit bulls that are super social, play very well with other dogs. I know plenty that don't. So everything is dog dependent. Yes, they do by nature through their breed have specific traits. But those traits can very much be worked out if you socialize them properly, train them properly, expose them to things from a young age.
Do you have a certain dog you recommend, or let's say clients you work with that they prefer for house protection and
Yeah.
family security? What are the common breeds that you deal with in that regard? And what would you recommend?
So protection dogs is German Shepherd, Belgian Malinois, Dutch Shepherd. If you're going with like an off-breed working line, giant Schnauzers, Dobermans, Rottweilers. So you have obviously the standard dogs, which I mentioned before, are like the Shepherds, the Malinois, the Dutch Shepherds, the Herders, which is a combination of Belgian Malinois and Dutch Shepherds.
Okay.
And then obviously the off breeds are for the people who don't want to go with something super standard and they go with the Doberman or with the Rottweiler or with the Corso.
You know, a quick story. A shout out to a good friend of mine, Robin, and her husband Bob, that live in Virginia. So when I was doing the Appalachian Trail last year, and I know you followed me, which I
Yeah.
appreciate you doing, I stopped in Virginia, and Robin's a friend of mine for 20 something years, and her and her husband hosted me for a few days. But while we were there, they were getting a new dog. So they have a farm and they have guinea hens, they have chickens, and their protective dog unfortunately had passed. And now they were having trouble with coyotes killing
Okay.
their chickens. So Bob educates me on a Grand Pyrenees, and
Great
he
Pyrenees. Yeah.
what's it called?
Great Pyrenees.
Great Pyrenees.
Yeah.
And he educated me on it, and he said, "Look, there's a household that just had a litter, and we're gonna a litter, right?
Yep.
Yeah." I'm thinking cat for some reason. So we go over there, and I see the puppies, and they have their identified dog that they're gonna get.
Yep.
Well, he goes, "Let me show you the father." We walk around the corner, and the father is in the cage with goats. And literally, Bob says, "Watch the dog." And that dog saw us walk around the corner and he put himself between, and it's huge. I didn't realize how big they were. Put himself between us and the goat and literally looked at us and said, "You aren't coming any closer." Like this protective breeding of 6,000 years for
Mm-hmm.
protecting flock.
Yeah.
So we get the puppy, we bring it home. 2 days later, I'm still staying with them. And this little puppy, after 2 days, already was putting himself in front of the chickens every time we walked around to block us from getting to the chickens. He already had bonded and was showing protection as a little puppy.
Yeah. It's
I found
amazing.
that so amazing.
Yeah.
And it
Their
was such a
genetics are
beautiful dog
unreal.
and a beautiful dog.
Mm-hmm.
Huge paws. I mean, it was wonderful to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have experience with them?
I do. They're very stubborn. Again, you can see they have a farm. The dog has a purpose. The dog has a job, not a household pet. A lot of dogs, a lot of people just get these dogs. So they're like, oh, they're cute and fluffy. There's plenty of cute and fluffy dogs that are bred to be household companions. A Great Pyrenees is not one of them. They are super protective. a lot of clients that I've worked with have had issues when, it's just a house dog where like they'll go after the mailman, they'll go after the UPS guy, like anybody that comes onto the property because they're a property guardian. So they're bred to guard, and that's what they do.
You know, I feel horrible when I reflect back on my teenage years, and we had a toy Chihuahua that was in the house, right?
Mhm.
And then we had two Labradors that lived outside. Second, sorry. And we had two Labradors that lived outside. And I feel bad when I reflect back on my life because what would happen is when I would come home from school to the gym or work, the dogs would run up to me and I would be like, get away, or maybe pet them for 2 seconds and walk in the
Yeah.
house. And
Yeah.
they got no attention. I didn't go outside and play with them like I had done when I was much younger. And unfortunately, you see that with a lot of adults that have dogs now. I'm sure you deal with families that bring dogs to you to train and they probably don't have much interaction because they're outside. What do you say to someone like that without, insulting them?
I mean, so in the area that I'm in, we don't have a whole ton of outdoor dogs. It's a much more like it's a nicer area, nicer neighborhood. So I don't really deal with too many people that keep outdoor dogs. That's really mostly, unfortunately, no offense to anybody in the South, but that's like a Southern thing.
Right.
Everybody in the South has their dogs outside. Here, it's quite uncommon unless we're dealing with, again, like a farm dog. So I have a friend who owns a horse barn 2 towns over, and she also has a Saint Bernard, and the Saint Bernard is out in the in the barn with the dogs or whatever. But she comes in at night. So that's the thing, is like she's out during the day hanging out with the chickens and the goats and the pigs and the horses, but she comes in at night. If I have a client who does have an outdoor dog, which I haven't had one for a really long time, I don't necessarily have an issue with it. As long as a dog is getting its fulfillment, as long as the dog is being exercised, as long as the dog is being taken care of, and as long as the dog has shelter from the elements. Massachusetts gets super cold. There's a lot of snow. It hails, it sleets, it rains. So as long as the dog has a way to get out of the elements, it's not so much of an issue. Because then obviously we're starting to tap into the animal rights activists. Somebody else catches wind of that. You have animal control showing up at your house, that kind of stuff. So typically I don't really deal with that with my clients.
Okay. You mentioned a Saint Bernard. I have to tell you, I had a childhood fantasy come to life when I had the pleasure to hike in the Swiss Alps, and I literally saw a Saint Bernard with the barrel on its
Did
neck.
you?
Yeah, and
Oh
that
my
was just
gosh.
a dream of mine. I thought it was only in cartoons. That
So
was,
do you know what that barrel has?
I want to say it was whiskey.
Yeah, they have whiskey or they have something else. So those dogs are taught to go find like hikers, skiers, whatever, if they get trapped somewhere, if there's I don't know what those things are called when the snow like shifts or whatever.
Avalanche?
Um, yeah, if there's like an avalanche or something, they're trapped somewhere. The dogs bring that because when you drink that in the cold, it circulates your blood better. So as they are, the search and rescue people are looking for you, the dog goes in, that barrel is there. Back in the old days, I don't know so much if they do that anymore, but the dog would the dog would give that to you, and then they would cover you so that you would
Wow.
radiate heat from their body.
Now it makes sense why so many people pretend to be hikers so that they can get whiskey brought to them as a personal service.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So, okay, I was attacked by a German Shepherd and it affected me. So every time I'm around a German Shepherd, which I love those dogs, I've always had a desire somewhere in my life when I finally have a chance to have dogs and I'm not traveling all the time. I would love to have two German Shepherds named Tango and Cash after the movie, by the way. That was always a goal of mine.
There you
Uh,
go.
but when I get around them, they can sense I'm nervous. I mean, I really tense up because of what
Yeah.
happened to me with
Yeah.
that attack. How have you, or do you even talk to people that have had that problem to give advice?
Um, I don't think that there is a simple answer to just like getting over having a fear of a certain breed. Obviously, if you're around stable dogs that are super social and are able to even kind of mitigate through the way that you're feeling around them. So, for instance, like my puppy, she's super social. She loves everybody. She's great with my kids and just loves affection, right? So try and like put yourself in a situation where you're around dogs that are just more innately social. And even though they read off of your cues that you might be nervous, they're still just going to be social with you and want to come over and like have you pet them. But I do think that the biggest difference, or I wouldn't even say difference, but I think what will help you sometime in the future if you decide to, do that is when you get a puppy and they're raised with you inside your house, you're not going to have a fear of that dog. They're raised with you from the time they're 8 weeks old. At 8 weeks, they're, energetic, but they're not going to do anything that's really going to hurt you. Like they puppy nip, but so does every puppy of every breed. So I think if you were to ever go down the rabbit hole of getting a dog, and I think if you start with a puppy, I think that fear will kind of like dissipate on its own as time goes on.
Right. Okay. Nice. Well, seeing your stories and what you do with training dogs, and then when I
Yeah.
saw you in Boston, we had dinner in Boston, and you showed me
Yeah.
your Mastiff, and you gave me a demonstration. It was a Mastiff, right? And you
Yeah.
brought him outside, and you gave me a demonstration of what you do. That seems so physical. So I know you work out, you train daily, and I know it's also for your own personal fitness goals, but also it has to tie into what you do with the dogs because that looks like a very physical activity all day long. Am I wrong?
No, it definitely is. So I'll tell you a really funny story about that. I started going to the chiropractor last week because I've been having issues with my back and my neck. So I had an original scan done last year. I went for a couple sessions and then life took over, got away from me. I stopped going to the chiropractor. Back started bothering me again. Went for an appointment. They redid an x-ray and my spine is literally like this.
Wow, really?
So, yeah. So they know that I work dogs. And so my chiropractor was like, I know this is going to be probably stressful on you, but like, I need to see you 3 days a week for the next 2 months. So I have to make time in my schedule to go see the chiropractor because he said, like, if I leave this alone, I probably will end up crippled in like my 70s.
Wow.
So yeah, it does take a toll on your body. And not saying that it's, only been the dogs. It's working out, it's doing CrossFit. I was fortunate that, from the time I've been doing CrossFit, I've never had like a severe injury, but there's definitely been times where there's like a little bit more ache and pain than what would be considered normal. Obviously, the time in the military, all of the rucking with, the Molly packs, which I'm small framed. I'm pretty petite. Those Molly packs probably weigh more than half of my body weight. So I definitely had a little bit of like injury from that as well. I had a stress fracture in my pelvic bone when I was in as well. And I had to like nurse that for a little while, so I think it's like a kind of just a combination of life, exercise, military, and then, working the dogs.
Did
So
you?
physical health is very, very important.
Very important.
Definitely in this industry.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's a lot to deal with, but obviously you're finding ways to mitigate it as part of
Yeah,
life. Yeah. There's a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of people. I don't have that statistic, but we do know that there are people that would give up that profession or they would stop doing it because it's such a taxing thing on your body. But when you exercise, when you work out and you know how to mitigate it with a chiropractor or doing yoga or Pilates, whatever helps you and you can get back in the fight, as we say, that's an important thing, you know?
absolutely.
Yeah. So when you were in the Marine Corps, did you do anything associated with dogs professionally in the Marine Corps or no?
Not at all.
Not at all. Did you have dogs while you were in the Marine Corps?
Yes.
Your personal dogs?
Yep.
But not obviously the first year because you were going through schools and training.
Nope. Didn't get. So I had my German Shepherd still, the one from my childhood. She
Back
stayed
home.
with my parents. So at that back at home. Yep. So she ended up passing away. I joined the Marine Corps in 2007. She ended up passing away, I want to say in 2011. And at that point, I already had my dogs. I was married. I had 2 kids. And I think it was about a year and a half before I got my own dog. She was too old at that point. I just didn't think that it was fair to move her with me. By the time that I got married, settled, between like deployment schedules, everything like that. She was already 10 years old. So I just didn't think that it was fair to be moving.
You lived overseas. I know you lived in Croatia. Where else did you live overseas?
Just Poland and Croatia.
Poland and Croatia. But in the Marine Corps, you lived in Croatia.
Yep.
Right. Right. Um, did you have dogs? Were you allowed to have dogs while you were in
Yeah.
Croatia?
Yeah. I had dogs in Croatia. So the big guy that's here, he's going to be 8 years old this year. He came with me. His breeder was in Serbia. So I imported him from Serbia. And then my old girl that I actually just lost a year ago, around this time, she was also imported from Serbia. So we ended up purchasing them overseas while we were living there.
Wow. Do you find traveling and moving from, an international or an overseas country back to the United States and vice versa difficult with transportation of your dogs, or is it relatively convenient nowadays?
I didn't think it was going to be quite as easy as it was. So when we were transitioning back to the US, I shipped back an entire litter of puppies because I had puppies at that time. And then I shipped back 4 dogs. So it actually went pretty seamlessly. So for the puppies, I used a transport company. So they did all the paperwork for me. I drove them to Budapest to get picked up. They flew out of, I want to say, Germany, but I can't remember now. But that went great. I drove them to Budapest, dropped them off at the transporter. They handled everything else. When the puppies got there, they called me and let me know. I had a friend pick up the puppies and then they got delivered to their new homes. In terms of the adult dogs, so we had the old guy that I was just talking about, and then my older girl, and then I had 2 puppies that I had retained from one from each of my other litters, but they were about 7 or 8 months old at that time. So seemingly adult dog size at that point. So we went to the airport with 13 suitcases, kids, car seats, stroller, and 4 dogs.
Wow. I feel horrible because I complain when I travel alone and I have to stand in a line. That's crazy. That
Yeah.
takes a lot of
But
patience. You learn
again,
patience, right?
went off the hook, like went without a hitch. They flew as baggage. So they flew as excess baggage. So we didn't do cargo. They were in the cargo area, but they flew as excess baggage. So it was just like a flat rate fee based on their weight. They were all in their crates. Their crates were labeled. They had, their food and water bowls attached. We put food on Ziploc bags on top of their crates with all their instructions and all their passport information. And they flew right into Boston.
That's amazing.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you a really funny story associated with that travel. So when we got to Boston, we're obviously waiting for our luggage. They came and found us because they knew that we were traveling with the dogs, and they let us know, like, okay, once you guys get your luggage, this is where you're going to go to pick up the dogs, this, that, and the other. Everything's fine. We get our bags, and then one of the cargo guys comes walking over to me and he goes, yeah, so we have a little bit of a situation. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, because I'm thinking like something happened to one of the dogs. He's like, yeah, so we opened up the cargo hold and were greeted by one of your dogs.
What does that
Not
mean?
not in their crate.
Oh
Like
my
they
goodness.
opened up the cargo and one of the dogs was just standing there wagging her tail. And they're like, thankfully, she just was super sweet. And we were just like, go in your crate. And she popped right back into her kennel. But at some point during the flight, who knows how long, she popped the zip ties on her crate and got out of her kennel. So
Incredible.
yeah, it was a pretty interesting. They
That
were
is
like, thank God she was friendly. I'm like, yep,
Oh my
yep,
God.
very
Right,
friendly.
right. So when you talk about a seamless transition with transporting your dogs and the puppies, what about expenses? And I don't need to know numbers, but was it inexpensive compared to what you thought it might have been, or was it over expensive to what you probably had in your mind?
No, so shipping the dog's excess baggage is actually quite inexpensive. Way cheaper than flying an adult dog in cargo. I don't know if we got away with that because at that point we were on diplomatic passports. So I'm not sure if there was some kind of, bargaining chip that we had used because we were obviously on orders getting sent back. too. So we were on official military orders. But essentially I just called the airline once the tickets were booked and I said, I'm traveling with 4 dogs. They're going to be traveling excess baggage. They're like, okay, no problem. Just make sure they have their crates, gave me all the instructions. We paid for them at the airport. I believe it was less than $1,000 to ship back all 4 of my dogs,
Okay.
which is not the way that it works when you're shipping a dog separately. Now, the thing with doing the excess baggage is you have to have a ticket. So you can't use excess baggage unless you're also flying. Otherwise, they have to be shipped cargo. And cargo is usually pretty expensive. I would say for an adult dog coming from Europe now, again, 6 years ago, now coming from Europe, I believe it's around $1,500 to $1,800 to ship an adult dog.
Okay.
One dog.
Interesting. You've done this multiple times. This is not the only time you went through a transport of your dogs on a flight, is it? Or is that the only time?
No, I've shipped puppies before. So yeah, that's something that I have done. And I've never done adult dogs. So that was my one experience with shipping my adult dogs when we were leaving Croatia. Other than that, it's always been puppies.
Do you find like living in Croatia and living in the United States or even living in Poland, are people different with their dogs, how they see their dogs, or are all human beings where they have that in common no matter what culture they come from? Like how they
I
raise them, how they love them, how they feed them?
I would definitely say that people in Europe in general, overall take care of their animals better.
Okay.
They just have a different understanding of just dogs in general. Like you don't really see so much stuff in terms of, the desire for trainers, any of that kind of stuff really. So most people, their dogs are kind of self-taught. And so they do have trainers out there, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, I think people in general are just more responsible with their animals.
Right.
Most of the dogs are taught off leash. Whenever you go to the parks, we live next to Maximir, which is the biggest park in Zagreb, in the capital, and it's all off leash dogs. All the dogs are off leash and they just hang out. They go play with other dogs. When their owners call them back, they always come. You'll see people riding bikes or on rollerblades. Their dogs are just jogging right next to them, all nice and happy. The thing that impressed me the most overseas was there was dogs that were unaccompanied by owners, and they would literally use the crosswalks to cross the street.
Really?
They would not randomly dart across roads. There would not be an owner in sight, and you would just see a dog walk up to a crosswalk, look both ways, and cross the street. I was, as a trainer, absolutely blown away by seeing this. It was incredible.
Sounds like an animated movie almost.
Yeah.
Not real life.
Yeah.
So not Europe, but the Republic of Georgia, right? Former country in the Soviet Union, but now it's its own republic. I had a chance to visit Georgia, and I was in Tbilisi, and I remember being very emotional and my a broken heart basically because they have such an infestation of stray dogs that they're all tagged by their ear by numbers, and they're everywhere, Paula, just laying on the sidewalks on the street. People walk over them, don't even give them attention, and they almost look like they're laying there to die. It was very sad to see, and I don't know how, almost like a homeless problem, like with people. And even though we complain, right? A lot of people complain about the homeless situation. I know people complained in Georgia about all the stray dogs, but what's the solution to something like that? One thing that I do admire about the United States, and I've seen so many people, you even alluded to it earlier, are people that rescue dogs and they go to shelters and they give them a home and they take care of them. That's not something anyone can do. I know a lot of people think it's sad to see and they talk about it, but they would never adopt a dog. But yet you have someone that goes and adopts 10 dogs to give them a home because they love animals. Yeah. That's difficult, because everyone's got a different feeling.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, the way that I look at it is there's 2 ways to get a dog. You go to a reputable rescue, you go to a local shelter, or you buy your dog from a reputable breeder. The inherent overpopulation problem is lack of understanding of how to responsibly breed dogs, or just not spaying and neutering your pets. And that's kind of what the issue is overseas, is with that overwhelming problem of having all these street dogs, the only real solution to that is to go in and alter all of those dogs. Otherwise, they're going to breed like wolves do in the wild, right? And then it just causes an overpopulation issue. But for me, rescuing, it has its place. There are certain people who can do it, and there are certain people who can't. I don't dog anybody for going to a rescue organization or adopting from a shelter. You just have to, especially when you're talking about adopting an older dog, you have to understand and be of the mindset that this dog is not perfect. Otherwise, it wouldn't be here. There obviously is certain circumstances where, like, a family member passes away, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, those dogs are not in those facilities, or they're not within a rescue because they're what you would consider a perfect dog. Usually those dogs have behavioral issues, they have medical issues, maybe both. And sometimes people get overwhelmed because they didn't sign up for what it is that they thought that they were getting.
Right. Wow. Do you have I don't mean to put you on the spot with this question, but what breeds have the longest lifespan and which ones have the shortest lifespans?
I mean, I think everything is situation dependent to where the dog comes from. Obviously, the dogs that come from better breeding, you'll see that their longevity is a little bit longer versus getting a dog from a backyard breeder or like an Amish puppy mill, something of that nature. Pet stores, huge no-no. Don't buy your dogs from pet stores.
Why is that?
Those are all dogs that come from puppy mills. So those are all the mill dogs that come from the Amish. They're overbred. They're kept in horrible conditions. And essentially all you're doing is you're fueling, that market to allow them to continue breeding more dogs.
See,
They don't have.
I'm so unintelligent in that. That's exactly where I would have gone to purchase a dog.
Yeah. Do not go to a pet store ever. Yeah.
You know what else I'm not to cut you off. You know what else I'm guilty of, and I regret this. It's like human beings that abuse food. I'm that guy that used to mix table scraps with dog food because the dogs were happy when they ate it. Is that a bad thing? Because I hear it's not a good thing to do.
It's not necessarily the worst. There are worse things in owning a dog than giving them a couple table scraps here and there. It's not going to kill them. Obviously, anytime that you're, buying a dog, rescuing a dog, adopting one from the shelter, you should always kind of Google restricted food list to make sure that you're not giving your dog something that they shouldn't be eating anyway. Yeah. Avocados, grapes, tomatoes, that kind of stuff, garlic in large dosages, chocolate is lethal to dogs. So I think just as a dog owner in general, that's definitely something that you should be, looking at and making sure that you kind of know what your dog can and can't eat. But giving them table scraps here and there, it's not the end of the world.
Well, let me tell you a story. If I'm lying, I'm dying. Here in Louisiana, I witnessed, and this is maybe 20 or 30 years ago, a woman that was obese and she had a dachshund that was so overweight. And she would literally make a filet mignon, grilled asparagus, mashed potatoes she was serving us, and put it on the ground. And the dachshund, his feet were touching his body. There was no leg. It was just feet, and and just waddled over and would eat, and could literally not walk more than 5 feet without collapsing and out of breath. Yeah, I find that abusive.
Draw the line. Yes, yeah. So,
but they look at it like love and care.
It's
almost
funny
like
that
a human being.
I know. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because obviously depending on what vet you use, they get a little funky about, what you're feeding your dog. So a lot of vets that are not educated in raw diet and dogs are very anti-raw diet, which is essentially all literally raw meat. It's raw, chicken drumsticks, duck necks, turkey backs, that kind of stuff. You have to feed it very balanced, right? So you have to supplement with berries for digestion, giving them different supplements that they can't get from just the meat. But obesity in dogs is a huge issue. And I think a lot of veterinarians are afraid to even say something to people because we live in a society where you don't want to offend anybody. So they try and go about it kind of roundabout way, hey, just so you know, Sparky's gained a few pounds, and let's try and get him back on the right track. But obesity
Same with humans,
causes other health issues.
right?
So you think that you're loving them, but the term that I use is you're literally loving them to death.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then they aren't as active, they aren't as physical, and then they have health issues
No.
that correspond with
Yep.
that.
Absolutely.
Paula, do you have this is an opportunity to plug a website or your Instagram somewhere where anyone watching this would like to check out what you do, your company, and then the pictures, because you have some wonderful photographs of the dog shows you've done, your training
Yeah.
videos. It's incredible. So, what are they?
So my Instagram is all over the place. I have my personal one, which I do post a lot of the dog stuff on there, but that one's more like geared towards my personal dogs, my family, working out, and the things that I enjoy doing. But it's a public page, so you're welcome to follow it. It has a very long hashtag. So I know you said you'll put it in the bottom, but it is a black dot GSD dot and dot a dot blonde. So it's a super long one, but like I said, I know you'll put it at the bottom. My training page is deluxe canine underscore training. And so that's the one that I post all of my client dogs on whenever I'm doing one-on-one sessions, when I have dogs that come for board and trains, all of their videos and training sessions and pictures are posted on that page. And then I have a page for my breeding program with the Corsos and the Shepherds and the French Bulldogs. And that's dark horse underscore Cane Corso, which is CaneCorso. So you can follow one of them or all of them or none of them.
Appreciate that. Thanks. I'll definitely add it with the post when I make this.
Perfect.
Okay. And a question off the topic of dogs. What was your favorite location in Croatia that you love to visit, and do you miss it?
My favorite, so I have two. So my favorite cities were Dubrovnik. And that's because I was a huge Game of Thrones fan back in the day, and a lot of their filming was done there. But the coastline there is absolutely incredible. All of these like small castles that they have that are right by the sea that you can walk into. The view there is just amazing. And then my second favorite city is Zadar, and that's also a coastal city. They have this beautiful sea organ that you can go and visit where the waves wash against this wall and it creates music that comes out of the top. And you can just literally sit there on the steps and listen to this sea music that's made through the walls of like the seawall. And it just is so incredible. I can't even describe like how beautiful those places are.
Do you miss it?
Absolutely.
And what about cuisine? Is there a certain cuisine that the Croatians are known for that you love?
I'm actually not super partial to Croatian food. I think a lot of their stuff, they have a lot of seafood, which I like seafood, but I don't love seafood. In terms of like seafood, I'm more of a sushi person or like a sirdahi tuna type girl.
Right.
Whereas they do like a lot of like the different like fish, and I'm not like super into just like fried fish or whatever. They do have very good like meat platters where they kind of like skewer a bunch of different meats, and then like meats, potatoes, and then like I'm a huge salad girl, so they had a lot of like really interesting salads with like tomatoes and cucumbers and red onions, and I'm a sucker for a good salad. So
I have a lot of friends that are from Chicago as well. You mentioned Chicago. Do you
yeah.
have a favorite deep dish place in Chicago that you recommend?
Oof.
What's like the
I
top ones?
So there is a place that I used to go, it actually like a boyfriend way back from high school. His family, he had some family in Chicago. So whenever they would come up and visit us, there's a place called Giorgio's. And it is, I wouldn't consider it deep dish because it was like a square pizza and it was always cut in squares, but it was absolutely amazing. Like the crust was always like crunchy. You could pick this up. It didn't flop over. The cheese was always melted, super perfect. And they did a bunch of like really interesting pizza combinations. And I just remember that was by far probably the best pizza that I've had.
Aren't you a Bears fan?
I'm not a football fan in general. But I don't cheat on my teams. So yeah, if I'm like rooting for a sports team, and then I'm a hockey girl.
But
So
I thought I've seen you wear Bears like clothes before. Am I wrong?
way back in the day. So
Yeah.
like when we did when my ex and I did a like a little mini maternity shoot, I was in my Bears jersey and he was in his Patriots jersey.
See, that's what I was going to ask you. How is it living in Boston, being a fan of Chicago and
Oh my gosh, Boston fans are nuts. They have got to be the most crazy sports fans that I've ever encountered in my life. They are so about their sports. It is insane.
Yeah, it's a lovely city. I had a
Yep.
chance to visit, obviously, as you know, for the first time in my life
Yeah.
last year, and
Hopefully I'll be back.
I hope to. I fell in love with Boston. I spent 5 or 6 days there, I think it was, and
Yeah.
it's my first time. It really was a lovely city. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, Boston's awesome. There's so much different stuff to go see. And even on the outskirts, like going to Salem, Mass, which is awesome, like during Halloween time in the fall. There's just so much stuff to visit out here.
So let me digress back to pizza. If you had your choice, deep dish Chicago or New York uh, flat,
Deep dish Chicago for sure.
no doubt about it, right? Even though they're both fantastic, how can you turn down pizza? At least that's
Yeah.
my.
Oh, I love pizza. I'm a
Do you
pizza
know?
snob.
Do you know anyone that doesn't like pizza? I do, and I never understood that. How anyone could not like pizza.
I know people who like pizza but don't eat it just because of like carb stuff or whatever,
Yeah,
or
that's
like
not the same.
gluten
Yeah.
allergies, but they don't like the like gluten-free
No,
type crust or whatever. But
I'm talking
other
about people that just don't like it, won't eat it. I
Nope, don't
yeah,
know a single person.
that's what I thought I would be able to say, but that's not the case. I know two.
There's always a first for everything.
That's right. And usually when somebody tells me that, they've never eaten pizza. So how do you
Yeah,
know if you don't like it or not, right? Or they judge it off Pizza Hut, Domino's, that type of pizza.
that's not pizza.
That's not pizza. I feel the same way. In fact, um, I know when you have your palate acquired to a certain taste, like let's say you grew up on Domino's and then you go to Italy and you
Yep.
order a pizza in an Italian restaurant, you might find it disgusting because
Yeah, you're like, what is this?
because you compare it to what you're used to in the States and vice
Yeah.
versa. Yeah. Isn't that funny how that works?
Yep.
But it's the truth.
Yep.
How many duty stations did you serve in the Marine Corps? Was it just Camp Lejeune or did you go somewhere else?
Lejeune, Chicago, and then Virginia Beach.
Did you have a favorite location?
I thought Lejeune was so much fun. Like I had a great time there. I know people don't love that base. It's kind of like, oh, I'm stationed in Yuma, and like Yuma has, like
Right.
I feel like I don't know. I loved Lejeune. I thought it was a blast, and I Virginia Beach was a lot of fun too.
Yeah. I love Camp Lejeune. I was there for the first time in about 12 years just last month. And
Yeah.
I was never stationed in Lejeune as a permanent duty station. I spent a lot of time there in schools and
Yeah.
going to
Training.
different seminars and training, but I never was actually permanently stationed there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like the area, quite a
Yeah.
bit.
It's changed a lot, I'm sure. I haven't been down there in years now, but I'm sure it is not the way that it was when I was there last.
So back to a question about the training of your dogs and other people's dogs, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah.
I think I asked you this earlier, but I don't know if we really went into an elaborate explanation of it. Recommendations to people based on their lifestyle. Do you get those kind of questions from people that maybe follow you on your social media that say, look, here's my household. I have a child this age, or I'm alone. I want a protective dog. I want a dog that's family friendly. Are
Mhm.
you good at giving recommendations on certain breeds to fit all of those scenarios?
Absolutely.
So if people follow you on your page after we talk about this that don't know you, are you
Mhm.
open to anyone reaching out to you and asking you these questions?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's lovely. I appreciate
So
you offering.
I am planning on actually starting a service that's specifically geared towards that. So it's going to be a puppy finding program for families, singles, whatever. It doesn't matter like what your dynamic is. But essentially, I'm going to be creating a document that you're going to fill out, which gives me your lifestyle information, your occupation, your daily exercise or just routine. And then obviously breeds that you're interested in, absolute must-haves, grooming requirements, training requirements, exercise requirements. And it's going to be like a full service process where like I'm going to connect with you. We're going to do an interview over the phone. I am going to help you reach out to breeders. I will help you fill out applications for puppies, or if you would decide to go with the rescue option, I will find you reputable rescue organizations. And I'm basically going to do all the pre-screening for you. I just give you the information in a document and then help you fill out the applications. And it will come with a training course for the puppy when it's young and first comes home, kind of adapting them into your household, and then follow-up training when they're a little bit older to help with like off-leash manners and loose leash walking or whatever else, whatever other goals you have for your dog.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, Paula, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to me about these things and answer my ridiculous questions on the
Oh,
topics of what you do and the topics of what you don't do, just to kind of entertain me. I appreciate it very much.
absolutely.
But before we wrap this up, I'm going to give you the last words. Is there anything you want to share that we haven't talked about to close this out?
If you're in the Boston area and you're looking for a trainer, feel free to follow me on social media. You can reach out via email. There is a contact button on my main training website that has my phone number and my email attached to it. I like JP had asked earlier, I train every breed, every age, behavioral issues, basic training, off-leash training, puppy foundations, sport and protection dogs. So you name it, I'm your girl.
Thank you, Paula. I appreciate your time. Good to see you. Yes.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Bye.
Bye.